But I'm also going to start on Facebook as well. And obviously we'll still let people in, and hopefully we'll get some people now to join us online on through Facebook. But as we get prepared for, can you hit Facebook? As we get prepared for Purim and going into this holiday, and thinking about doing stuff that's fun, which we're supposed to do at Purim. Before we actually start this morning, let everybody else in. Rosemary, do you want to share something about David today as we mark his yahrzeit, the loss?
I already told the story about how my grandfather accepted him as a Jew. So, but he did tell me that although he was not, raised as a Jew, he told me that he felt closest to Judaism, and he did see David as one of his heroes. So,
well, I just want to share that I had the pleasure of traveling to Israel with him, and we had the chance to go around Israel. And I know he loved to travel and loved history, and that's one of the things that I love, and I know he a love for that part of the Jewish people and that part of kind of the Jewish experience that's well, we didn't really call it history, but it was just part of the consciousness. It was not really like it happened in the past even, but it was just part of who we are for these people and the text. So I think it's important that, again, as we dedicate our study to David's memory and to his legacy, that it's important we turn over, as we have for so long, the reading of today's text about David to his wife. So I'm going to put up the text here on the screen from Samuel. By the way, I will tell you, to start everyone with a laugh, that it is Purim tomorrow. That was my Purim costume last year. I was dressed as a Corona bottle. That was a tribute to both the beer, which and to the which we wanted to laugh at, because we're supposed to laugh at things that scare us, and that was definitely part of the things that were frightening us last year. So I will tell you that my costume this year, not related to Corona per se, but I did find inspiration from what we do in Purim, which is occasionally have a cocktail. That's all I'll say. But please come in costume tomorrow at 7 o'clock for Purim. Just come for home costume. Just come for fun. Just come to laugh. It will not be a long celebration. It's about an hour. We know it's a work night, school night. Some people are actually going back to work. So I don't know. I was going to say you can wear your Purim costume to work, but no one would know. Like nowadays, grown-ups dress up for Halloween, but they come to work dressed on Halloween, which was never something that happened when I was a kid. But I wonder if you came to your work dressed on Purim in a costume, you just told everyone you're dressed up for Purim. You're insane. But at least you're wearing clothes. Anyways, and then Purim goes right into St. Patty's Day. So for those that are drinking, it's a bad week for your liver. It's a bad week for you, liver. Talking to my liver. You better be ready. Anyways.
Why are you talking to your liver?
Why am I talking about? Because I told my liver just now. Judith just walked in. It's a bad week. We're going right from Purim into St. Patty's Day. Anyways. So where we left off last week, we waited for you, Judith. We stalled.
I appreciate
Did
that. I'm waiting. I'm not all the way in yet.
Judith, your hair looks lovely.
Wow.
It does. Doesn't her hair look great? It's
Can we see it?
come over here and show your
My locks.
model your new hair.
Where am I looking? Where's
There,
my camera?
This one right here.
That one
this
right
one.
there?
This one. Yeah, they can't see it. Or I'll move it.
You want me to move it down?
No, no, it's okay here. Move the camera. Wait, 1 second. Go, go.
So Alana made hamantashen that are green. She put green food coloring in the,
There she is.
put green food coloring in the.
Ah,
in- She put green food coloring in the dough and did apricot filling so that they're green and gold in honor of St. Patrick's Day.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Got a couple St. Patty's days that have been on for.
Yep.
And I there's a leprechaun. I'm not.
Oh, gosh, I remember that.
Yeah. So,
Not my favorite.
no,
Not sure which my favorite is. I was pretty fond of Willy Wonka. She had a really cute.
that was,
Willy Wonka.
that was a really good
It was a
costume. We
really
had
cute
Oompa-Loompas and we
Wonka.
had Veruca Salt, and we had Violet Beauregard.
Violet.
So we had all the kids dressed up.
And
Anyways,
thing one and thing two, obviously.
yes, that was the cat in the hat.
Yeah.
So, yeah, my costume this year is not as clever, but it is enjoyable. All right, folks, so,
These are hamantashen.
Hamantashen, we get it. If you had been here in person, you could have had a Hamantashen.
Sorry,
Sorry.
they are blueberry flavored. It was
Oh,
very-
nice. So we did make Hamantashen last weekend in our house. Last weekend? Or the weekend before?
Last-
Okay.
No,
No, it's the week-
not 2 days ago, it was a week ago.
All right, so, folks, we're gonna get into, and there's still people coming in, and they'll get home. But anyways, what we read last week is that David is being chased he's being pursued by Saul, and there's this scene where David and Saul wind up on different sides of a rock. Escarpment, what's the word?
Escarpment.
Yeah, something like that, yeah. The rocks, like in Vasquez Rocks, where they can see each other, but they're far away from each other, they can't get to each other easily. And so that's what we read about. Now, today, we're gonna pick up that theme and actually read even closer pursuit with the hunter becoming the hunted. So let's take a look. So that's where they left off. The place, the rock of separation, the Selah HaMachloket, the separation, the rocks of disagreement of different sides. So, so Saul had to leave and left his pursuit, but now David goes into hiding in En Gedi, which is in the deserts. There's a desert oasis of En Gedi. En Gedi means the spring, the well of the goats, the mountain goats. And we've been there before because it's right near the Dead Sea. So it's very dry in the area of En Gedi. But they have these beautiful springs that you have to walk to. And we went on the last trip that the Kogans were at. We went to the En Gedi Springs. Remember that?
Yeah.
We hiked up there and some people got into the water. There used to be more water up at En Gedi. There's a lot less. There was a lower water table there. But it's a pretty cool place. That you can still go there and walk around this place as it's described in the book of Samuel in this great scene that we're about to read. It's a great adventure.
I would like to add that En Gedi was one of my David's favorite places in Israel.
That's perfect. For those who just walked in today, we are dedicating our study to the yard site, to the memory of the lost. So this is perfect. Reading this started David today. We did not plan it. We knew we were going to be reading about David, but we didn't know we'd be reading about David. So again, this is a beautiful place to live. And has this wonderful historical significance to us from this story. It's a really, really fun and beautiful, complex story. So let's read it. Chapter 24.
David went from there and stayed in the wildernesses of En-Gedi. When Saul returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told that David was in the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 picked men from all Israel and went in search of David and his men in the direction of the rocks of the wild goats.
Yeah, which is another word for a gedi, the Ya'alim are the wild goats. It's another word for wild goats. So he goes into this area where the wild goats live. And again, Saul had gone to go fight the Philistines, which is why he broke from his pursuit of his last one. So what happens here?
And he came to the sheepfolds along the way. There was a cave there, and Saul went in to relieve himself. Now David and his men were sitting in the back of the cave. David's men said to him, "This is the day of which the Lord said to you, I will deliver your enemy into your hands. You can do with him as you please." David went and stealthily cut off the corner of Saul's cloak.
Wow. So again, to relieve himself, if we look at the note here, it says to cover his feet, which is a euphemism for going to the bathroom, which is why they use the word relieving himself, because that's also a euphemism for going to the bathroom. This
isn't that the same euphemism that Ruth uses?
Covering of the feet.
Yeah, but with Boaz.
With Boaz, yes. So there is.
But it didn't mean she was urinating at his feet.
But in there, well,
How sexy.
going to the bathroom. That might be a euphemism for something else.
Okay.
Yes, the word raglav, which is usually translated, it's the Hebrew for feet or for leg, or foot. It's also a euphemism in English for something else. It's the third leg. That was the word that they used here. So that's the word, covering his feet. So again, you usually think he's uncovering his, covering his feet while he's going to the bathroom, in the sense that his clothes come down over his feet while he's going to the bathroom. So that's words of it. By the way, you're going to see another euphemism for this activity coming up as well. But again, it's part of what makes this book funny and exciting and kind of an adventure, because you have things like this. So he's going to the bathroom. While he's going to the bathroom, David cuts off part of his cloak, which is obviously pretty wild because it's symbolic. We already saw that Saul cut or tore Samuel's cloak. When Samuel was walking away from him and saying, "I'm never going to see you again," he pulls on Samuel's coat and tears it. Now David has cut his coat. Again, remembering cutting the coat. We're going to read tomorrow night, for those who join us on Wednesday nights, we're going to read about Joseph's coat. So the coat getting ripped or torn is symbolic. Oh, sorry, not tomorrow. You're right. Not tomorrow night. Next Wednesday night, when we read the story of Joseph. That's next Wednesday. But it's close. Anyways, so this is a symbol, right? He cuts his garment, cuts off his coat.
But afterward, David reproached himself for cutting off the corner of Saul's cloak. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my Lord, the Lord's anointed, that I should raise my hand against him, for he is the Lord's anointed."
He says that twice. He's the Moshiach. La Mashiach, Ki Mashiach. He is the anointed.
Right, but
God's anointed.
what is it?
Who killed him? No, you didn't miss it. It's a sign, it's a symbol. Say what it's a symbol of. But David actually, and again, this is kind of the point I was making about David, is that unlike other characters in the Bible, David actually says this. He reproached himself. His heart struck him. By Yahweh, that something happened inside of him where he regretted it. And in case you didn't know why he regretted it, he said why he regretted it. Because he raised his hand against God's anointed. Now, we already know he's already God's anointed. And so it's pretty obvious why he's worried about this. Right? This isn't just about Saul, it's about him. If somebody can cut the garment of the king, cut the king, if you will, then I can get cut. So you can't do this. And he actually, it says, he actually says that I did the wrong thing. I shouldn't have done it. And we know why he did it. He did it to show Saul that he could have killed him. But he also now regrets that he did it, because what he did is sends him a message that essentially also could be a message for his own demise one day. He's setting a precedent. So he says to his other people, he doesn't just say it to himself, he says it to his friends, his courtiers, his assistants, his other people. So here's what he says.
David rebuked his men and did not permit them to attack Saul. Saul left the cave and started on his way. Then David also went out of the cave and called after Saul, "My Lord King." Saul looked around, and David bowed low in homage with his face to the ground. And David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the people who say, 'David is out to do you harm'? You can see for yourself now that the Lord delivered you into my hands in the cave today. And though I was urged to kill you, I showed you pity, for I said, 'I will not raise a hand against my Lord, since he is the Lord's anointed.' Please, sir, take a close look at the corner of your cloak in my hand. For when I cut off the corner of your cloak, I did not kill you. You must see plainly that I have done nothing evil or rebellious, and I have never wronged you. Yet you are bent on taking my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may he take vengeance upon you for me, but my hand will never touch you. As the ancient proverb has it, wicked deeds come from wicked men. My hand will never touch you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog? A single flea? May the Lord be arbiter, and may he judge between you and me. May he take note and uphold my cause and vindicate me against you."
So you can hear David's speech here. This speech to King Saul, which of course is also a speech to everybody else, which is, you can't hurt the king. Let God punish him, but I'm not going to punish him. And he actually said that. Let God punish him. I'm not going to do it. He also, of course, says some interesting things in here, which is, why are you pursuing me? I'm nothing. The dead dog, the single flea, is him. He's saying, you're pursuing me. I mean nothing. Now, that's a bit disingenuous. This is a little bit of David, I wouldn't say lying, but it's not telling him the whole story. I mean, Saul is 100%. I mean, he knows David's more popular. What he probably doesn't seem like he knows, because he never says it. Well, he doesn't say, he says, I know David will be king one day, but he doesn't say God's already made him king. He doesn't know that Samuel necessarily, doesn't seem to know that Samuel's already anointed him. So when David calls himself a dead dog, single flea, it's not really true. He's demeaning himself to make Saul not be afraid of him, but he's not really insignificant. He's already essentially, he hasn't had a coup yet, but he is the coup. So there's a reason why Saul was afraid of him. Interestingly, though, David says something into this, which is also really cool, which is also trying to get Saul off the hook. Stop listening to people who tell you that I'm the problem. I'm not the problem. Never been the problem. I've never done anything wrong. So stop listening to people that say I'm the problem. So he actually gets Saul off the hook a little bit for this, because he says to him, he said to him, why do you listen to the people who say David's not to do harm? He said that to him. Why do you listen to people who say that? Which means that there were people that were saying that to Saul. Maybe some of his inner circle. All I know is that, all we know reading this is that David gives Saul an out by saying, it's not your own ego, it's not your own fear, it's not your own, that evil spirit that comes over you. It's the people around you who are telling you that I'm going. So it's a really interesting, very complex thing, because there's several things that David says here. There's a lot here in this speech. Did this really happen? Did this really take place? David's people definitely want this to happen. Let's see what Saul says, and then you can, maybe it'll help you, maybe it won't, to figure out whether this really happens. But so David says, this is completely unjustified. You try and get it. Now remember, he also has an army of 600 people. Not like he's just him. There's an army of 600 people. By the way, David also says, my people have told me to kill you. I haven't done it. He says that too. I've been told to kill you. So here's what Saul said.
Is David married yet to Saul?
Yeah. No, he's married. Right now he is. I don't know. But he was married to her. He was married to Nicole. I think the week before.
Where I was not. Okay.
So he's married to Nicole as of right now.
Okay.
As of right now. That's all I say. As of this moment, he's married to her. As of this moment, in chapter 24.
You mean as of this moment, right?
Right now, he's married to her. All right. Well, I don't know.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Well, let's look.
Okay.
Let's look. Okay, we'll get to it. I promise. All right. So here's what Saul says.
When David finished saying these things to Saul, Saul said, "Is that your voice, my son David?" And Saul broke down and wept. He said to David, "You are right, not I, for you have treated me generously, but I have treated you badly. Yes, you have just revealed how generously you treated me, for the Lord delivered me into your hands and you did not kill me. If a man meets his enemy, does he let him go his way unharmed? Surely the Lord will reward you generously for what you have done for me this day. I know now that you will become king and that the kingship over Israel will remain in your hands. So swear to me by the Lord that you will not destroy my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's house."
So there Saul completely acknowledges that that David will become king. He doesn't say, I know Samuel anointed you. I know that happened already, but he does say, I know you will be king. So whatever he's hearing from Jonathan, from other people, from the fact that he married off his daughter to him, not his oldest daughter, but a daughter to him, everything seems to line. He killed Goliath already. He's already popular. He's already got an army, all those things that would indicate that David is going to be king. Saul actually just acknowledged it. Saul has now said, you will be king. And he says, though, do one thing for me, though. When you're king, don't wipe out my family. That's a really, really horrible thing to have to say to someone. Don't kill all my family.
Well, if Saul had become king, would he would have wiped out David?
Saul is king.
Oh, Saul. Okay, I'm sorry.
So would Saul wipe
So
him
now
out?
Saul
Maybe.
would wipe He didn't hurt any of David's family?
We don't know. Well, right now, there is no family other than Michal.
Okay.
So the question is, so the question you could ask is, did David and Michal have a kid? Which they didn't. Which also then begs the question, if they had, would Saul's line have been, preserved? Because David's kid would have been Saul's kid, Saul's grandkid. That would have been a good way to unify the two families. Could have happened. Could have happened. Not only could it have happened, maybe it should have happened. Keep that in mind for what happens to Michal and for David later on. Power that could have, what could have happened, So that's what Saul says. Just keep my family, don't kill my family. And so what does David do? Last line of 24.
David swore to Saul. Saul went home, and David and his men went up to the strongholds.
So they split up again. That seems to be the end of the story of David and Saul. Now they can essentially go their directions. We're getting there, but we're not there yet. We're getting there. That would be a great way to end the story of their last meeting in person. It's not the last meeting in person, at least according to the Bible. So here's what happens in chapter 25.
Samuel died, and all Israel gathered and made lament for him, and they buried him in Ramah, his home. David went down to the wilderness of Paran.
Yeah. Not a lot about Samuel dying. He was such an important guy. He's such an important guy that the book is named after him. There's not a whole lot about it, other than, again, he died in Ramah, and he's buried, and everyone was sad. So all Israel was sad, but it doesn't really say much more about it. But it is crucial for our story that Samuel is indeed dead. Not mostly dead. Come back.
Really? Most sincerely dead.
Oh, sincere.
He's got to come back. Now, I will tell you, that's not the important thing of this verse of chapter 25 that I want you to focus on for just 1 second. We have an error here, which is another example of scribal problems. It says he went down to the wilderness of Paran. Paran is not in the area that we would have expected them to go. Paran is like in the wilderness, like in the Sinai, like not near there at all. It is mentioned in the Bible. Paran is one of the places that the Israelites go to on the way from Egypt to Israel, but it doesn't seem like he would have gone all the way there. Ma'on, which is what the Septuagint says, is a much better answer based on where David is for the next part of the story, which is what David does during this time. He's already done it. He's done it. He's in En-Gedi. He's been there too. He's hiding out in Judah. He's hiding out in his tribe amongst his people, which makes sense. Those would be the people who naturally would support him. We did read last week, though, that he was in one of those cities in Judah, in Ziph, and the people there informed on him and told King Saul where he was, which tells us that even in the tribe of Judah, David wasn't completely safe, which is why he had to hide out in caves, which is why he had to go to a place like En-Gedi, where he's living in literally rock caves, kind of the caves that they found the Dead Sea Scrolls later on. Dead Sea Scrolls also say Ma'on. So we're pretty sure that he's hiding out in this area of Ma'on, which is in the southern part of Judah, in the Judean desert, definitely far away from Benjamin, definitely as far away from where Saul is living, as trying to be away from King Saul, but that's not far enough. We're about to see. Oh, and by the way, the next line says he's in Ma'on, or he's in that area. We're going to read this story.
There was a man in Maon whose possessions were in Carmel. The man was very wealthy. He owned 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. At the time, he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. The man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. The woman was intelligent and beautiful, but the man, a Calebite, was a hard man and an evildoer.
Yeah, so there, well, a couple things. First of all, Maon, as we said, is in the southern part of Judah. This Nabal is a Judite. He's from the tribe of Judah, which is the same tribe as David is from. His name is Nabal, which means fool. Just kind of a giveaway. It says that he has a wife named Abigail. What do you know about Abigail? Well, she's intelligent and beautiful. Kind of a little bit of a hint that she's going to be important to the story. She's intelligent and beautiful. She's got great qualities of mind, and she's also a beautiful woman. Beautiful to look at. What's interesting about this is it says he's from Caleb, who's one of, right? Caleb is one of the heroes of the Bible. He's from the tribe of Judah. He is the other guy who gives a good report about, along with Joshua, of what the land looks like. So could he be from Caleb's family? Yeah, it's possible. But when it finishes with the words is, he is a Calebite, it also could be a Kelev. He's a dog. Because the word Kelev also means dog. So it could also be a play. Maybe he was really a Calebite. But he's also, in addition to being very rich, he's a bad guy. Hard man is what it says. Kasha, Vera, and he's bad. And maybe he's a Calebite or he's a dog. He's definitely not good. And we kind of know already from his name. And he's Nabal. He's a fool. He's a boor. That's what he's called. So David is in the territory of Nabal. I mean, it's really set up for what's going to happen here. But let's read it.
David was in the wilderness when he heard that Nabal was shearing his sheep. David dispatched 10 young men, and David instructed the young men, go up to Carmel. When you come to Nabal, greet him in my name. Say as follows, to life, greetings to you and to your household and to all that is yours. I hear that you are now doing your shearing. As you know, your shepherds have been with us. We did not harm them, and nothing of theirs was missing all the time they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. So receive these young men graciously, for we have come on a festive occasion. Please give your servants and your son David whatever you can.
Yeah. So David basically sends Nabal a message, which is we'd like
A shakedown, kind of.
a little bit of a shakedown, a little bit, other than he also kind of reminds him that your people were with my people and we kind of protected them, which is also a little bit of a shakedown, which is the assumption here is we could have taken stuff from you before and we didn't. So we're asking for a little something now. And he says, this is a festive occasion, you know, we're having a party. It's the holidays, it's the springtime. Give us a little something. And he says, give your servants and your son. He humbles himself. He doesn't say, you know, we're much more powerful than you, though it's kind of implied. You know, we're here. You should take care of us. Now, we already know that not all the Judites are taking care of David. So Nabal would not have been alone in that he is, you know, maybe not wanting to take care of David's people. And David has a lot of people. It's not a little amount of stuff that David necessarily is asking for. But we already know, based on what we know about Nabal. And again, Carmel, right? Carmel, we know there's a Carmel up in Haifa. There's also a Carmel down in the south. There's one in Judah. There's a Carmel in down here, this is below Hebron. So this is below Hebron.
What does Carmel mean?
Carmel means this is like a mountain area. It's like the word I'm looking for. So it's not a mountain, but it's like I'll look for the word. It's like it's not an escarpment. I don't want to use that word again.
You like that word.
But it's like that.
Crab.
No, it's more than that. anyways, I'll look it up. But yeah, the Carmel, the famous Carmel is up in Haifa. That's the one when we say Mount Carmel. That's where, but it's not that Carmel. This is the Carmel in Hebron. And it's they in the West Bank. But there is a Jewish settlement there, a Moshav in Carmel as well. So I'd say it's disputed, but it's not like the other parts around Jerusalem that are really heavily, there's like 3,000 people that live in Carmel. I was looking it up because I don't think I've ever actually been to this Carmel, but it looks kind of cool. And it goes back to David's time when there's people living there. All right.
David's young men went and delivered this message to Nabal in the name of David. When they stopped speaking, Nabal answered David's servants, "Who's David? Who is the son of Jesse? There are many slaves nowadays who run away from their masters.
Oh my goodness.
Should I then take my bread and my water and the meat that I slaughtered from my own shearers and give them to men who come from I don't know where?"
That's the words that he uses. Like, I don't know where these people are from. And of course, he doesn't call, he doesn't just say David, the guy that has a huge army and seems to be really popular with everybody, is a hero. He says he calls him the son of Jesse, which is the same thing that Saul calls him when he wants to make him not very important. Who's this guy? Son of Jesse. And he says there are a lot of slaves that run away from their masters, which is another way of saying he is supposed to be working for Saul. He's not. And he is a loser on the run who I'm not going to take care of. So no respect for David whatsoever. And he's talking to David's servants now. He's not talking, not like he's just turned into his guys. He's literally looking at these people and saying, I'm not taking care of David. Kidding me? Who's this David to ask me for stuff? So, what is
Thereupon David's young men retraced their steps, and when they got back, they told him all this. And David said to his men, "Gird on your swords." Each girded on his sword. David too girded on his sword. About 400 men went up after David, while 200 remained with the baggage.
Yeah, so David has about 600 men. So if you do the math, 400 go with him on his message back to Nabal, and 200 are staying back with their stuff. But of course, it says right here, get your swords. Get your swords. So this seems like, again, a little message that they're going to send a message to Nabal, even if they're not going to kill anybody, they're prepared to kill people. This is why I say David, we get to see another side of David, which is not, again, he's not a thug necessarily, but there's an implication that things could have gotten pretty bloody here. He's asking for care from his own tribe. We know that he's being chased for no reason. He doesn't want to do this necessarily. But there's a sense here. The only way, and again, as people have pointed out before, long before I did, the story only works as if David is scary. There's no threat of David. There's no implied threat, and the story doesn't really work. If people aren't afraid of David, then this story doesn't work. So they must have been afraid of this. People must have known he could do stuff if he wanted to. So here's what happens. What do we do?
One of Nabal's young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, that David had sent messengers from the wilderness to greet their master and that he had spurned them. But the men had been very friendly to us. We were not harmed, nor did we miss anything all the time that we went about with them while we were in the open. They were a wall about us, both night and by day, all the time that we were with them, tending the flocks. So consider carefully what you should do, for harm threatens our master and all his household. He is such a nasty fellow that no one can speak to him.
I love this. This is one of Nabal's guys, or one of his cowboys, if you will, saying, you know, he's really a jerk. Our boss is a jerk. And I will tell you that David's people were very good to us when we were out in the fields, when we were out taking care of our sheep. They protected us. We had nothing to worry about, which implies that, again, sometimes people were worried about stuff like Amalekite raiders, Midianite raiders could have come and stolen their flocks while they were out shearing them all. It's a bad time to get your stuff stolen when you have it all together, right? You're rustling cattle, not when they're out in the, not when they're on your farm, on your land, when you have people all around you, but when you're out riding them from one place to another. It's really easy to come by and take them out when they're out in the open. That's exactly what he just said. We were out in the open, we were vulnerable, and David's people were there and took care of us. They were actually, they were good. And this guy, our boss, is going to get us killed right now for no reason, because he's an idiot. He's a bad guy, and no one can talk to him. No one can get through to this guy. So they again, they go to Abigail and say, what are we going to do? This guy's going to get us killed for no reason. So that's what now Abigail has to respond. And again, look at this story. Look at the way this story is laid out. It's another example of the detail and the way this book gives us details and conversations that we don't normally have in the Bible. This back and forth is not what we usually have, this level of explanation. And again, another dig at our boss saying he's an idiot, you know, he doesn't listen. He's such a nasty guy. So
Abigail quickly got together 200 loaves of bread, 2 jars of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 seahs of parched corn, 100 cakes of raisin, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. She loaded them on asses, and she told her young men, "Go on ahead of me and I'll follow you." But she did not tell her husband Nabal.
yeah, so she decides to intervene and do the right thing, the thing that's going to keep her family and property safe. Abigail is using her head. We already know she's smart. So
Why did
she's
she marry him?
right.
Probably arranged.
Yes, she did not have a choice. Maybe. Yep.
She was riding on the ass and going down a trail on the hill when David and his men appeared coming down toward her, and she met them. Now, David had been saying, "It was all for nothing that I protected that fellow's possessions in the wilderness, and that nothing he owned is missing. He has paid me back evil for good."
Which again, like, you know, the implication here was I was supposed to get something for being out there. Which again, you know, doesn't necessarily say that Nabal went into an agreement with David to protect his stuff. So David felt he was entitled to it. That line kind of gives it away. Because he said, what did I do this for? For nothing. I stayed out there with his stuff for nothing, which means that David thought he was going to get paid for doing that. Again, did David do that regularly during his life? Did he do that?
Well, you know, if you're an insurgent, you're not out there farming your crops or tending your sheep, you're hiding. So you got to live off what people in the neighborhood are willing or maybe not willing to give you.
We'll do this a lot. However, it's usually doesn't work well for people, and usually doesn't work well for the system. Usually is pretty corrupt when that happens.
Mhm.
Well, obviously
As a Chicagoan, this sounds real familiar to me.
it's Chicago. Well, it happens in lots of places. It happened for years in Colombia, where you had FARC and other narco terrorists and narco armies that basically lived off of the cocaine that the local people produced. Or in Afghanistan, where the Taliban has been living off of the heroin poppy, you know, production that, you know, that is there. So yes, the assumption is that we're the local army, even if it's not the local army that's officially there following it. And they control it, and they control the products that are created and produced by the people that live there. It's not a good situation, right? Because, you know, people have to essentially pay whatever the local guy wants. But I mean, this is why this is easily transportable to so many times in so many places. I tend to think, again, you know, you could use Chicago in the 1920s during Prohibition as another example, but it also is, you know, it's like those great Western movies, you know, or movies that not either took place, you know, in the kind of Wild West times when there were parts of America that were not really under control, mining towns, but also those movies like, you know, the Three Amigos, you know, well, they parodied that, but you know, in Mexico where people have to give, you know, their stuff over.
The Magnificent Seven.
Magnificent Seven, yeah, the local banditos that would ride through and take whatever they wanted, whatever they felt entitled to. And so it's not a great system, right? It's not indicative of a safe or stable situation for people. But David, we just don't know how long this went on for and how many other people David did this to. This is important for a really, really, well, we're going to see why it's a really important reason. You could probably guess what's going to happen as David and Abigail have now met or are now meeting. What happens as they meet?
May God do thus and more to the enemies of David, if by the light of morning I leave a single male of his. When Abigail saw David, she quickly dismounted from the ass and threw herself face down before David, bowing to the ground. Prostrate at his feet, she pleaded, "Let the blame be mine, my lord, but let your handmaid speak to you. Hear your maid's plea. Please, my lord, pay no attention to that wretched fellow Naval, for he is just what his name says. His name means boor, and he is a boor. Your handmaid did not see the young man whom my lord sent. I swear, my lord, as the Lord lives and as you live, the Lord who has kept you from seeking redress by blood with your own hands, let your enemies and all who would harm my lord fare like Naval. Here is the present which your maidservant has brought to my lord. Let it be given to the young men who are the followers of my lord. Please pardon your maid's boldness, for the Lord will grant my lord an enduring house, because my lord is fighting the battles of the Lord, and no wrong is ever to be found in you. And if anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, the life of my lord will be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of the Lord, but he will fling away the lives of your enemies as from the hollow of a sling. And when the Lord has accomplished for you, my lord, all the good he has promised you, and has appointed you ruler of Israel, do not let this be a cause of stumbling and of faltering courage to my lord, that you have shed blood needlessly, and that my lord sought redress with his own hands. And when the Lord has prospered my lord, remember your maid."
Wow, that's a pretty powerful speech that she just gave. She hit all the right marks, right? She begged for forgiveness. She gave him the food. She says, "Here, I'm going to bring you all this food." She deprecates and reminds us that her husband is an idiot to begin with. She reminds David and tells David, "I know you're going to be king of Israel, and let all your enemies be destroyed."
Isn't she kind of asking David to kill Nabal when she says that he should go all the way of your enemies?
Yeah, but he doesn't. She actually doesn't say he has to kill him. To kill
No,
her.
but she kind of implies.
She also reminds him that he shouldn't shed blood needlessly.
Exactly. So she's to some extent at this point, she's still just asking David not to kill anybody, making it real clear that in the moment that she says this to him, David said,
She's kind of pointing out Naval hasn't tried to kill David.
yeah, she doesn't, we're not clear here whether she wants him to kill David. I would say she just doesn't want to kill anybody. And David has most certainly said, "I'm going to kill everybody." So when I say that David has a complex side to him, let me just remind you that it says, David said, if by light of morning I have let a single male of his still be alive, he's saying, I'm going to kill them all. I'm going to kill all the guys there. I'm not going to just kill Nabal. I'm going to kill every guy there. So he said that. The Bible says he said that. The Bible that the story that he approved said he said that, which means that he said that. If this happened, he said that. Why would he make that up? By the way, if he didn't make that up then how many other times did he say that? And if he said that, how many other times did he do that? He seems to be very serious about it when he's coming down the hill. I'm going to kill every guy there. By the way, as I said, there's another euphemism here. The word that he used for the guys is every guy, everyone who pees against the wall. That's another allusion to going to the bathroom here. And that's the words that he actually used. Everybody who stands up to go to the bathroom is going to die. Which again, I mean, we assume that's an idiom. He didn't make that up, right? So he said, every guy standing is another way of saying that. I don't really say every guy is going to die. So, yeah, David seems pretty bent on doing that. So, Abigail made a great speech at a crucial time because it was about to go down. It wasn't like, it's not like we're supposed to think, well, maybe David was going to spare them anyways. That's not what he just said. So Abigail just intervened on behalf of everybody. It's a beautiful speech. And I will tell you, what's really powerful about this speech too, is she uses a phrase which becomes very common and very important in Jewish tradition, which we often use now, but this is the first time we've actually seen it be used. She says, if anyone sets out to pursue you and seek your life, if they chase you, right, if they pursue you, rodef, if they try to kill you, may the life of my Lord be bound up in the bundle of life in the care of the Lord, which is Trura b'tzror hachayim et Adonai Elohecha. May your life be bound up in the life of God. B'tzror, this word, to be bound up with God, is the phrase that we use when we say that someone has died and is now part of God, has entered eternity. We use it in the El Maleh prayer. We say, bound up in the bond of everlasting life, bound up with God. Here it says, be bound up with God. So here it's used in a way of protection, of saying, may you be protected. But we actually use that now as a phrase when someone passes, to be bound up in the bond of life. We actually put that on a cemetery, in the cemetery, on a headstone. If you see the Hebrew letters, the Hebrew acrostic, right? I'll show you. This is the phrase that we use for this phrase that she uses is, show you, see it a lot on a headstone. This is not the headstone that I was hoping to show you. Here, see this on many of the headstone. These are some headstones. I say, bound up in the bond of everlasting life. Right here, you've seen that tough body that, hey, bound up in the bond of eternal life, everlasting life. So that phrase that we have, what? Yeah. So the pei nun by itself just means po nivkar, here lies, here lies. But this phrase that we use, be bound up in the bond of everlasting life, she just used it. Abigail just used it. So again, we usually use it in regards to death. Someone who's passed. But here she uses it to basically say, let David be protected. Let him survive any attack. Let him stay alive. So yeah. And of course, it's such a beautiful phrase. Because it also harkens back to David, right? He says, let your enemies be flung from the hollow of a sling, right? And David was using a sling to kill Goliath. So let the people who are bad to you, your enemies, let them be tossed like a sling, like you throw a sling. So it's a very powerful meaning, very smart, very just has so much in it, so much beautiful language. And of course, most importantly, she brought the goods. The food is there too. It's not just talking. She brought the stuff. So what is David's response to Abigail?
David said to Abigail, "Praised be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you this day to meet me. And blessed be your prudence, and blessed be you yourself for restraining me from seeking redress in blood by my own hands."
Wow. So he actually said to her, may you be blessed. You be blessed yourself, not, just you, or not just your house, your children, whatever. May you be blessed because you have shown this great wisdom, this great foresight, this prudence that you have in making me stop from killing. I was going to kill people. Damim. Blood was going to flow. All right.
For as sure as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, who has kept me from harming you, had you not come quickly to meet me, not a single male of Naval's line would have been left by daybreak. David then accepted from her what she had brought him, and he said to her, "Go up to your home safely. See, I have heeded your plea and respected your wish."
Yeah. Now, you can probably guess what's going to happen to Abigail. Maybe you can. But what's interesting about this is that David says, yeah, because of what you've just said and done, I'm going to spare everybody. No one's going to die. Which also seems to imply you are going to die too. Kind of what he says.
Oh.
Says that, right? Kept me from harming you. Now, again, it could be the you that includes everyone else in your house, which but it could also have included your boys.
Children.
Your boys were dead. Because when he says, I was not going to let a single male of Nabal's line live. Think about that. That's Abigail's sons. It could also be nieces and nephews, or at least in this case, nephews. Because he said male. He's not going to leave a single male. Which again, one who pees against the wall. I'm not going to leave any of those guys those people who pee against the wall alive. That is Abigail's sons. I assume, we assume. Keep that in mind. So he says, I'm going to listen to you. So here's what happens to Abigail.
When Abigail came home to Naval, he was having a feast in his house, a feast fit for a king. Naval was in a merry mood and very drunk, so she did not tell him anything at all until daybreak. The next morning, when Nabal had slept off the wine, his wife told him everything that had happened, and his courage died within him, and he became like a stone.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful scene. And it's really very smart again on her foresight, her prudence, that she doesn't tell him until he wakes up the next day. She doesn't tell him when he's drunk. She tells him when he's fully awake and is able to comprehend what happened. So she just told him, I paid off David. He was going to kill you, but I paid him off. So now Nabal's heard flat out that his life was at risk. Indeed, it was over. He was gonna die. Now he's also learned that his wife is the one who came for him. And it kills him inside. It kills him inside.
About 10 days later, the Lord struck Nabal and he died. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Praised be the Lord, who championed my cause against the insults of Nabal and held back his servant from wrongdoing. The Lord has brought Nabal's wrongdoing down on his own head."
Yeah, so he died 10 days later. Coincidence? Or was he murdered? As Keith Morrison would say. That pesky DNA. No, he would say, was this murder? No, they would it definitely seem suspicious that he died only 10 days later. Well, we know he had a very bad reaction to the news that Abigail saved his life from David. So could have had a heart attack, could have killed him inside, whatever, but it's pretty wild. He dies 10 days later. Did he check his food? I don't know. He had a lot to drink sometimes, so maybe there was something in his drink.
Maybe it was his liver.
Maybe it was his liver. That's right. He had his liver. Pesky liver. Anyway, so here we go. I love Dave. I love Dave. I can't help it. It's the same story every week, but I can't.
David sent messengers to propose marriage to Abigail to take her as his wife. When David's servants came to Abigail at Carmel and told her that David had sent them to make her his wife, she immediately bowed low with her face to the ground and said, "Your handmaid is ready to be your maidservant, to wash the feet of my Lord's servants." Then Abigail rose quickly and mounted an ass, and with 5 of her maids in attendance, she followed David's messengers, and she became his wife.
Yay! Yay! They lived happily ever after. They lived happily ever after. What a weird story. I came to kill you and your husband, and I wound up marrying you. That is the story.
Well, she wanted it too, though.
Oh, fine. I'm still saying it's a creepy, weird story.
Okay.
It's not the kind of story that you would normally read about in a, well, it's not a very common love story today. I came to kill your husband and you, and I decided
My name is
I'm
Montayo.
gonna, it's kind of a weird story.
But
Right?
she had no
What?
royalty or, she comes as his handsmaid, right? And so she's nobody in the story, just
Well, she's humbled herself. She's got money. She's got property. That really helped David too, right? He's got all this property that was Nabal's. Interesting question. What happened to their kids? What happened to Nabal and Abigail's kids? Now, it doesn't say here what happens. It doesn't say. But what we interestingly just read a few lines above is that David was 100% prepared to kill them. And the Bible just said that. Just said that he was going to kill their kids. Their line. It doesn't say their kids, but we assume that could have included at least their kids. So if David kept Abigail's kids alive, the ones that she had with Nabal, that means that those kids knew that the only reason why they were alive was because their mother talked their stepfather out of killing them. That's what the Bible just said. I'm not making that up. We just read that. That's not my interpretation. That's what the Bible just said. So if Abigail and Nabal had kids, the only reason why they're still alive is because their mother intervened and stopped David from killing them on that glorious day that they met on the road and fell in love.
So take me and I'll save my children.
It's a pretty weird story that they knew, these kids would have known that the only reason why they're still alive is because their mother married their stepdad. Now, I'm not saying that's something that you read about in a mafia story, but if you read about that in a mafia story, you would not be surprised about reading that in a mafia story. It would definitely play out in a strange way if those kids had any allegiance to their father in the first place. Again, maybe they didn't like their father. No one else liked their father, so maybe they didn't like their father. But the point is it's a very weird situation to be in. If that is, if in fact that's what would have happened, which is that they were there simply because their mother intervened and stopped them from being killed by their stepdad. It's a scary situation, I think. It's not one that I would personally like to live in. It was one that maybe is dysfunctional by its very nature. So, but Abigail has proven herself to be very, very worthwhile, and well, she's proven her immense value already to David with her wisdom and her beauty. So, as we said before, David is married to Michal. Michal isn't here with him. She's still living back in the palace. So the fact that he's now married to this woman, no, he's married to a woman. It's nice.
What about the first, they had multiple wives, right?
Well, wait, we didn't get there yet, but yeah, he did. But he's not with his other wife. He's not with his other wife, Michal, right? So it's fair that he has another wife.
It's geographical.
He's still a king, well, kind of king. It's good to be a king, as we say. Goes in the next slide. What do we read?
Now David had taken Ahinoam of Jezreel, so both of them became his wives. Saul had given his daughter Michal, David's wife, to Palti, son of Laish from Galim.
Yes.
What?
So there we have it, Judith. Was he married to Michal? No, he was not married to Michal. But we don't know when he was not married to Michal. So by that line, it says that Saul had given Michal. Had he already given her to her, or did he respond after he hears that David is married to two other women? We don't know. The way the Bible just threw it out there is it seems to have been a fail. I mean, it may have already happened. We don't know whether it was because of this. Maybe it happened around the same time. Does the Bible want us to know? Yeah, it's not really that weird because he wasn't. And again, being married to more than one wife was not an issue. David was already married to Ahinoam. We don't know when he married Ahinoam, but he now has two wives. Abigail was not the only wife that he was married to. So this isn't really a love story of David finally finding a woman because he can't have Michal. That's why the story is so complex and so amazing. Because it's not just that Michal isn't living with David anymore. She's living with someone else.
Didn't we read Midrash about how she gets to Palti?
We get some midrash. We did read midrash, and we'll revisit that midrash about what happens with Paul. Not so much how she wound up with him, but what happens when. And by the way, the Bible
Later on, Michal shows up in his house.
Oh, Michal and him do get reunited.
Yes.
But the story is complicated because, again, it's not just that she wasn't living with him. The Bible just reminded us or told us, or again, we don't live there. She's not married to him anymore. She's married to somebody else. So again, was that when Saul and him are playing cat and mouse together?
But doesn't it imply that they never were married?
Oh, they were married. They were living together.
Michal.
They didn't have a kid.
Okay.
Did
But
they
she
have,
was with someone else that Saul gave her to, right?
did they have divorce proceedings at this time?
Obviously not. I think I'll move
Where
on
you
to
could
the
put
next
your,
one.
your
So
shoes
Cheryl
out?
wants to know, did they have a divorce? Was there actual, a divorce? Doesn't really say.
No, but you can break your, I mean.
Your ketubah?
You could break your.
You know, a woman can't break a ketubah, a father can't break a ketubah. A king can do whatever he
Do
wants.
whatever the hell he wants.
So a king decided to give his daughter to some other guy. But it's not just that he took her away from David. He gave her to someone else, which is an ultimate act of,
I don't like
Disrespect.
I don't ever want to see you again. Don't come anywhere near me. You're dead to me. Every other part of that.
But however, Rabbi, we don't know how long David was gone, right?
Well, we can do the math. We will do the math on this. It will come up. Actually,
Okay.
it's coming up. We're going to see how long he's on the run for. But yes, was it 5 years at this point? By this point, problem is we don't know. The Bible does not tell us how long after David went on the run did he take his wife away and give her to some other guy. We don't know. Was that a month? Was it a year?
Take my wife, please.
Yeah, take my wife. Yeah, David did not go along with this. This was not something that David was cool with. It's not befitting David or David's role already, knowing that he is the Messiah, chosen by God. So Saul to some extent makes so that David is not going to live, or maybe can never live with her again. To some extent, this is Saul's doing. But this story is not over yet. This story of Michal is not over. And we're going to see, to me, there's like 10 scenes in the Bible that are mind-blowing scenes. The scene of David and Michal reuniting is a mind-blowing scene. And it has been, they've attempted to recreate this a couple times on film. It never, I don't think it's ever been able to be done with the full range of emotion that one could imagine that happens in that scene. But this is an important part of the scene. So remember this scene, this one line that we just read, which is that Saul is given to, takes Michal and gives her to another man, Palti, the son of Laish. That's his name, Palti, one of the more interesting unknown guys in the Bible. All right, so we're going to read this chapter, and we're going to finish up with, I don't know if we're going to finish this chapter, but we're going to read some of this chapter. I screwed up. I did not bring the Homentashen. I ran out of the house.
You can eat mine instead.
No, I need to give it to him. I'll give it. I'm going to give it to him. All right, so we have so many Homentashen. You have to come. Everybody has to come tomorrow night for Homentashen. All right, so let's read what happens in chapter 26 as David has one more scene with Saul.
The Ziphites came to Saul at Gibeah and said, David is hiding in the hills of Hachilah, facing Jeshimon. Saul went down at once to the wilderness of Ziph, together with 3,000 picked men of Israel, to search for David in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul encamped on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon, by the road. When David, who was then living in the wilderness, learned that Saul had come after him into the wilderness, David sent out scouts and made sure that Saul had come.
Yeah, so this is another round of this cat and mouse game. And once again, it brings in these people of Ziph, who were again Judites. These are people from David's own tribe who've once again gone to King Saul and said, David is here, come and get him. So once again, he sends 3,000 troops. It's not seem like this is a different author. It seems like it's the same author telling us this didn't happen one time, that David was getting chased by Saul all over the place. Now, Saul had recently sometime in the last chapter, in the last months, had told David, I won't do that anymore. I won't come after you. Seems humbled by the experience. Not according to the Bible, that he was humbled enough. So Saul is going to go back at it.
David went at once to the place where Saul had encamped, and David saw the spot where Saul and his army commander, Abner, son of Ner, lay asleep. Saul lay asleep inside the barricade, and the troops were posted around him. David spoke up and asked Ahimelech the Hittite and Avishai, son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, who will go down with me into the camp to Saul? And Avishai answered, I will go down with you.
Right. So David, so Saul on his side is with his commander, Abner, who's a very important guy to Saul. He's his right-hand man, he's his chief. David has his crew that includes a guy named Ahimelech, who is not a Jew, he's a Canaanite, he's a Hittite, and Abishai, who is his nephew, his nephew. He's the nephew of Joab. Joab is David's Abner. He's his right hand man. So Saul has Abner and David has Joab. Joab is David's cousin, which means that Zeruiah is also his cousin. But he's known as Joab's nephew because he's closely related to Joab than he is to David. They're all related. They're all part of the same family. Which, by the way, also tells you that David essentially trusted his family. He also trusted other people, but he trusted his family. He trusts them only so far, because as I showed you in the book of Kings, one of the things he tells Solomon to do once David is dead is to kill Joab. So that's David. David loved Joab, his cousin, his chief leader. Outward. He is very effective, Joab. We assume that Abishai, from the same crew, is also good at killing people. And so they say, David says, who's going to go down with me into Saul's camp? This is kind of a dangerous thing to do. And Abishai says, I'll go down.
So David and Abishai approached the troops by night and found Saul fast asleep inside the barricade, his spear stuck in the ground at his head, and Abner and the troops sleeping around him. And Abishai said to David, God has delivered your enemy into your hands today. Let me pin him to the ground with a single thrust of the spear. I will not have to strike him twice.
So Abishai says, I'll kill him. And I'll kill him quick. I mean, that's what it just said. There's no other way of making this sound any better than it does. It's very good. It's very well written. I'll kill the guy quick. And once again, that same language is used as when they were in the cave while Saul was going to the bathroom. God has delivered your enemy into your hands. The same phrase. So let me kill him. And remember, this whole thing of the thrusting of the spear, very reminiscent of when Saul tried to kill David. It's just giving him back what he's been trying to do to you. So here's what David says.
But David said to Abishai, don't do him violence. No one can lay hands on the Lord's anointed with impunity. And David went on, as the Lord lives, the Lord himself will strike him down, or his time will come and he will die, or he will go down to battle and perish. But the Lord forbid that I should lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. Just take the spear and the water jar at his head, and let's be off.
So it's another, let's just send him a message, right? We're not going to hurt him. Can't hurt him. Can't hurt the Lord's anointed. Because if you can hurt him, then one day someone can hurt me. I mean, that's the message. We're setting a very bad precedent if we kill him.
It's interesting that Saul's there without any protection.
What was that?
It's
Yeah, he's got his whole army around him, but they're asleep.
Oh, okay. Right.
Guard?
Well, they got in. They got in.
But But that's twice that he's tried to do that, and then he himself had said, oh, no, we can't. But he tried twice. Right? And it's, oh, no, I can't do this. No,
Well, he didn't try, he had the option, right?
that, it was,
Was
yeah, that's
presented.
his wanted desire was to, and then realized he couldn't.
Well,
But he did it twice.
we don't know that he wanted
Well, I
to.
was just gonna
He
say,
wants to
that's-
definitely send a message,
Right.
which is I could have killed you, and I didn't. So he did
I
it.
just picture these two guys standing there having this conversation. Okay, now you've got sleeping men all around them. You know, it just seems kind of.
So
They're whispering.
the point of what is happening here, of course, is that they get back into the camp, and whether that conversation took place out loud or whether they shook head, whether he's whispering or he's shaking his head, going like this and whatever. The point is that the way the story got told by David is he didn't have one opportunity to kill Saul like this, he had two. And this time, as we've already seen, other people are implicated in this too. This isn't like Saul just went off and went to the bathroom and could have been killed. As you pointed out, he's surrounded by his army. His most trusted people can't protect him.
But didn't Saul lose his strength because he didn't follow what he was, the Lord's?
So yes, so
Right.
Saul is punished to
Right,
some
he's
extent
weakened, right?
by this.
Okay, and then David comes in. Why would it give David any interest to kill Saul?
Because Saul's trying to kill him. Saul's trying to kill him. He doesn't want Saul to kill him anymore. There's 3,000 guys that came out with Saul to try to kill
Yeah,
David.
but David's strong.
I guess, but he also doesn't need this. I don't need this. I don't need this guy trying to kill me every day. I don't want to live in fear that some guy's going to get lucky and shoot me with an arrow because I am the most wanted man in Israel.
Yeah.
I am number one most wanted guy. And what happens if some little kid comes up and stabs me because everyone wants to kill me and he knows that kid's gonna be rewarded.
Yeah.
Because as long as David's not king, he's fair game.
Yeah.
Once he's king, then there might be people who are scared to kill him.
Right, but everybody knows.
David is 100% scared to kill Saul. David is 100% scared to kill Saul.
Right, actually, yeah, exactly.
He does not want that. He says, I cannot kill the Lord's anointed.
So is this?
He says, no one. He doesn't just say, I can't. No one can lay a hand on the Lord's anointed without being punished and get away with it.
So is this the fear level that we're experiencing now with these things?
I think people definitely have a frustration in what do you do? And by the way, that oftentimes is the situation. What do you do? Not just because someone's going to punish you for killing the bad guy, but who replaces him? Now, in his case, David's saying, I'm going to replace him. Is that really what is going to happen? David says that, but we'll see. We'll get to it. Is that really what happens when the inevitable happens to Saul? Okay. So anyways, we'll get to that. We'll get to that pretty soon. So
David took away the
you're in
spear.
a really deep sleep, by the way. The word here is tardema, which is only used when someone is in a really deep sleep. It's not just that you sleep. They were asleep, but he was really in a deep sleep. The word tardema is the word that's used, as we talked about many times. It's a comatose sleep. It's the sleep that Jonah goes into when he goes into the hold of the ship. It's the sleep that Adam goes into when he's going to get a rib taken out to make Eve. It's a really deep sleep. Not normal. It's maybe a little stronger. Yes.
David crossed over to the other side and stood afar on top of a hill. There was considerable distance between them. And David shouted to the troops and to Avner, son of Ner, Avner, aren't you going to answer? And Avner shouted back, who are you to shout at the king? And David answered Avner, you are a man, aren't you? and there is no one like you in Israel. So why didn't you keep watch over the Lord your king? For one of our troops came to do violence to your Lord the king.
Yeah, he doesn't say it was me and Abishai, but he said Abner. And he calls him out, Abner, where were you? And he doesn't actually call Saul out first. He calls out Abner and makes Abner look like a fool. And again, David, and we're going to see this later on, has a lot of respect for Abner. They know that Abner, he even says so right here, Abner, you're the toughest guy around, right? There's no one like you in Israel. You're so tough, but you're not protecting your king. So literally, he's not just now getting through to Saul that he can't be protected. He's now telling his most trusted general, you can't protect them. Nobody can protect them.
You have not given a good account of yourself. As the Lord lives, all of you deserve to die because you did not keep watch over your Lord, the Lord's anointed. Look around. Where are the king's spear and the water jar that were at his head? Saul recognized David's voice and he asked, is that your voice, my son David? And David replied, it is, my Lord King.
So again, that same scene. David, is that you? So Saul seems really messed up. And again, could be that he just woke up, he's tired, but it also seems that Saul's pretty messed up. Saul is not quite all there. And now David has not just gotten through to Saul that he's done, he's gotten through to the rest of Saul's people that he's done. Saul is done. You guys are defending a guy who's done. So this is very much like the first scene, but now even more so is a public humiliation of Saul and his people.
And he went on, but why does my Lord continue to pursue his servant? What have I done? And what wrong am I guilty of? Now let my Lord the king hear his servant out. If the Lord has incited you against me, let him be appeased by an offering. But if it is men, may they be accursed of the Lord, for they have driven me out today so that I cannot have a share in the Lord's possession, but am told to go and worship other gods.
Whoa, what's that about? They threw David out and basically say, you're not part of the circle anymore. You're not part of us anymore. You might as well go out and worship other gods. You're done with us. You're done with the Israelites. You're done with our people. Not anything wrong. By the way, there's also seems to be connected to David's challenge, which is to Saul, you're being given really bad advice by everyone else. Stop chasing me. Stop chasing me. These people are giving you really bad advice. It's done.
Oh, let my blood not fall to the ground away from the presence of the Lord. For the king of Israel has come out to seek a single flea, as if he were hunting a partridge in the hills. And Saul answered, I am in the wrong. Come back, my son David, for I will never harm you again, seeing how you have held my life precious this day. Yes, I have been a fool, and I have erred so very much.
So is this because David is not doing what he's been commanded to do, as Saul did not do what he was commanded to do?
What David's only trying to keep us alive.
I understand, but he's been asked to kill Saul.
Oh, David has been told to kill Saul by his own people, by David's group. David's people are saying to him, just kill him, be done with it. And David says, I can't do that. I can't kill him.
So it's not the same as Saul.
Yeah. So far, David, from David's point of view, there's nothing else he can do. It's kind of, he's trying to just get Saul to leave him alone. But at this point, what can he do? I mean, Saul apologized before and then came out and got him again. He says again, I made a mistake. This time again, he says, come back. Come back. I'll never hurt you again. But he's already tried to stab him at least 2 times when they were in the same place. So I mean, what would you do? What would you do if you were David?
I wouldn't trust
No
Saul.
trust.
I mean, you
Yeah.
can't. You're dealing with a person who's literally seems to be insane. Not a manic depressive, and somebody who just can't control himself, can't control. his-
Rabbi.
Yeah.
Do we know how old Saul is around this time?
No, the issue is, you know, if he's, look, he's old enough to have kids that are in their early 30s, you know, at the youngest, and Carl and Jonathan seem to be at least in their 30s. So we assume he's in his 50s or 60s by this point, right? At least. But
I'm just thinking maybe he has a little Alzheimer's here.
yeah, well, he seems to go in and out of his stuff though, right? He seems to go in and out of his, it seems to be more anger than it is memory.
Or is this apology is, you know, famous last words, you know, come here and I'll
You know,
kill you.
Interesting, because he really does seem to be upset about it, right? He doesn't just say, hey, come back, it'll all be okay. He says, I made a mistake. I'm wrong. I have erred so very much. He actually says, I've made a mistake. He doesn't just say, well, you know, we got really bad advice and we were scared of you, whatever. He doesn't say that. He doesn't make any excuses. He says, I will never harm you again, which, by the way, implies that he has harmed him. I just want to tell you that. He recognizes to some extent that he has harmed him. He has harmed him by at least chasing him and taking away his wife and scaring him.
But taking away his wife, it's possible that they thought he was dead if, you know, if he was gone 4 or 5 years.
Yeah,
And
but
that's,
he knows he's not dead. He doesn't seem to do it because he thinks he's dead.
but maybe the wife thinks he's dead.
He wants him dead. He wants David dead. He's going to do everything he can, at least sometimes, to make sure David's dead. We don't know how much time elapsed between these two scenes. We will get a little bit of time elapsing. I'm not sure if we'll get to it today, but we will get a little bit of how long some of this stuff goes on for. So here's what happens.
David replied, here is your majesty's spear. Let one of the young men come over and get it. And the Lord will requite every man for his right conduct and loyalty. For this day the Lord delivered you into my hands, and I would not raise a hand against the Lord's anointed.
Yeah, so David says to everybody, look what I did. Look what I did, right? I didn't kill Saul. I could have. I've been loyal. I've done the right thing. And again, I'm going to be rewarded from it, right?
And just as I valued your life highly this day, so may the Lord value my life, and may he rescue me from all trouble. Saul answered David, may you be blessed, my son David. You shall achieve and you shall prevail. David then went his way, and Saul returned home.
Wow. So this wasn't the same, hey, spare my family, don't kill my family. But there is a similar message, which is you'll be king. You will prevail. I mean, who's he going to prevail against? Essentially, he's saying, you're going to prevail against me. I mean, how does David become king unless Saul's not king? Can't be two kings. What was really powerful about this is he actually says to David, my son, Beni. He says, Baruch atah Beni, blessed are you, my son.
Could that just be in the spiritual sense?
Yeah, but he did, well, he's not his son-in-law really anymore, but he does call him his son. So here you have David being called son by Saul, which is very intimate, very powerful. It's Saul's recognition to some extent, not only that he's going to be king, but that he's his spiritual son. That they have a connection.
So Saul has to die before David becomes king.
Saul will have to die, but it's essentially you will be king one day. Now, did this really happen? We don't know. We don't know whether Saul ever said those words. What Saul does do is essentially say, "You're my son," and we have that connection, and that David at least wanted people to know that Saul said that. Did he say it? We don't know. But David wanted people to know Saul said it. That's the important thing. The official story is that Saul said that. The official story that David wanted out there was that Saul said that. One thing if he had simply left it at, "Don't kill the rest of my family when you become king." When he says to him, "You're my son, David, may you be blessed." If that really happened, then Saul goes above and beyond just simply trying to preserve his family. He's actually trying to be connected to David. It's possible he said it. Possible. It's also possible he never said that. And with that, we're going to read a little bit more just to give us, we're not going to get all the way to chapter 27, but we are going to read this very weird thing that happens.
David said to himself, "Someday I shall certainly perish at the hands of Saul. The best thing for me is to flee to the land of the Philistines. Saul will then give up hunting me throughout the territory of Israel, and I will escape him."
Yeah, so we already saw David once try to go to the Philistines, but we got the sense that things were not going to work out. But now he says specifically, "I cannot protect myself here amongst Israelites, including my own tribe of Judah. I've got to get out." And he says, "I'm going to go to the Philistines, because at least if I go there, then Saul can't get me." So is David really worried about dying? It seems like he's really worried about dying.
Even though they
Still
just
is.
had these incredible words together that didn't carry too much.
Correct,
He still
because he
walked
doesn't
away.
believe him. He doesn't believe that Saul is capable of keeping his word. He doesn't think that Saul, even if Saul believed it at that moment, he knows that Saul can flip and become insane, filled with rage, and want to kill him. So he says, "The only way I can survive is if I go to the Philistines. Then he will stop hunting. I don't have to live like this."
Is it a great distance?
No, it's not a great distance. So maybe he's going another 15 miles in a different
Oh,
direction.
okay.
So he went 15 miles in one direction. Now he only has to go 15, 20 miles in another direction. It goes to the Philistine territory, which is crazy because here it says David went to the Philistines. That's where he could find refuge. So here's what happens with our enemies.
So David and the 600 men with him went and crossed over to King Achish, son of Maoch of Gath. David and his men stayed with Achish in Gath, each man with his family, and David with his two wives, Ahinoam, the Jezreelite, and Abigail, son of Nabal the Carmelite, a wife of Nabal the Carmelite.
Notice how Abigail is still referred to as Nabal's wife. He's married to her now, but he still calls her, or somebody still calls her, they still call her Nabal's wife. So that's still her name. She's still known as that woman who was married to Nabal. So
That's like Jackie Kennedy Onassis.
that's true. That's true. She's always gonna use the Kennedy name.
Would not be ready.
Oh my gosh. The only problem with that analogy is that makes David Aristotle Onassis. That's the only problem with that. She is known as the wife of Nabal, the Carmelite. So Ahinoam, very popular Hebrew name now, Ahinoam, that's one of his wives. And here's what happens when Saul finds out.
And when Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he did not pursue him anymore. David said to Achish, "If you please, let a place be granted me in one of the country towns where I can live. Why should your servant remain with you in the royal city?"
Yeah, so he actually says to the king of the Philistine king of the town of Gath, "I don't want to live here in the capital. Let me go out into one of the towns, one of your towns. I don't want to stay in the city." which is kind of interesting because there seems to be something more to it than I just don't want to live in the royal city, right?
A third wife.
Not a third one, but it's an interesting one, yeah.
At that time, Achish granted him Ziklag. That is how Ziklag came to belong to the kings of Judah, as is still the case. The length of time that David lived in Philistine territory was 1 year and 4 months.
Yeah, so here we get a little bit of how long things went on for. So this next part of the story, if you will, happened over 1 year and 4 months. So we don't know how long the previous stuff went on for, how many years it went on for, but we will get a total. When we get to when David becomes king, we will get this timeline, which says that he was living like this for years before he became officially the king. He's king for 40 years.
What
Yeah.
is Ziklag?
Ziklag is the town in the Philippines.
Town.
And so he gets a town, not a city, but a town. But it's a town in the Philistine territory. And what's interesting about it is that the kings of Judah retained that town because King David was given that town, which of course implies that the Philistines were not uprooted later. Because if the Philistines still control towns, except for Ziklag, which is controlled by the kings of Judah, that means that the Philistines still maintain hegemony over their own territory during the time of King David and Solomon, which we know is true. The Philistines were not uprooted by David and Solomon. They continued on, except for, again, a couple towns, maybe, that went over to us. So he's in the territory for 1 year and a quarter, so to speak.
Why would they be so welcoming to David?
Why do you think?
They were afraid of him?
They were afraid of him, but remember, they got David on their side. And David seems to be really good at doing stuff like shaking people down and has he only has 600 people in his army, but it's 600 battle-trained guys that have been living on the run for years. So these are good soldiers. And of course, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So Saul is their enemy. He's been killing Philistines since he's come to power. So now if David is his friend, then maybe he's thinking things will be okay for me. And I can attack Saul with David. And what's he going to do? You know, and so also he could be figuring that if David does become king one day, we got a guy on the inside. That happens sometimes where foreign leaders support people they think will one day become powerful, perhaps president, and then cut them a break. It doesn't happen so much in this country. It might have happened 4 years ago, 5 years ago. But yes, people count on the fact that someone's going to take care of them when they're in power, even if they're your enemy. Vladimir Putin. It happens. It happens. Maybe there's photos. Anyways, let's keep going.
David and his men went up and raided the Geshurites, the Gizrites, and the Amalekites, who were the inhabitants of the region of Elam, all the way to Shur and to the land of Egypt. When David attacked a region, he would leave no man or woman alive. He would take flocks, herds, asses, camels, and clothing. When he returned and came to Achish, Achish would ask, "Where did you raid today?" And David would reply, "The Negev of Judah, or the Negev of the Yeramalites, or the Negev of the Kenites." David would leave no man or woman alive to be brought to Gath, for he thought, "They might tell about us. David did this." Such was his practice as long as he stayed in the territory of the Philistines.
Now, we're going to finish with that today, which is a wonderful story of David, what David did for that year and a bit that he lived amongst the Philistines. He raided people. He went on raids. So you can understand that the Philistines really liked him too, because he brought them stuff back. He brought them booty. He was a,
certainly word would have come that all the men and women died in this town,
okay. So why did he kill everybody? First, why did he kill everybody?
so that they wouldn't tell that they did this.
Yes, And so why did David care that people would know?
They're the enemies of Israel.
David didn't raid the Israelites.
Right.
He would tell the Philistine king that he was raiding Israelites, but he actually raided Amalekites and other people who were non-Israelites. Now, did David really do that? We don't know, because he killed everybody. So David's story, as I said, is a little bit more complex. We started to see David, another side of David. Now, this is the side of David where David would kill men, women, and children rather than let anyone know that he wasn't raiding Israelite towns, which is what the Philistines really wanted him there for. They wanted him there to raid other Jews. Like, go out and get your Israelite brothers and sisters. He didn't do it. Now, at least he says he didn't do it. His official version of the story is he didn't do it. It went out of its way just now to tell us that he lied to the Philistines and said he did it, but he didn't do it. He instead was going out against Amalekites.
Does Negev mean desert?
Well, it doesn't mean desert. It's that part of the southern part of Israel, which is a desert, mostly desert, pretty dry. And so he goes out and he gets these people, the Geshurites, the Gizrites, Amalekites, these are all non-Israelites. And so they live in this region. And again, you can see the region, it says, probably not Olam. That's not the right word. Olam is a word that means the world. Doesn't mean it's Olam is the globe. It's probably the word Telam, which is it's just one letter off. And so it probably was, and we know that because the Septuagint actually has the right word. And there's an area called Telam, which is mentioned in the book of Joshua, which is clearly makes more sense. But the point is that he would go out into the desert, other parts of the Negev area, but not necessarily Israelite places, and he would kill these people and he would take their stuff, which also, by the way, seems to imply that there's still Amalekites living out there that Saul didn't kill. So it wasn't only King Agag that he didn't kill. According to this, there are other Amalekites, at least according to David, that he's killing. I don't know. It's very convenient that everyone who could tell us what happened is dead, because the Bible just told us that everyone is dead that was in these towns, but they also said that they were not Israelite. Why? Because if David went out and raided Israelite towns while he was living on the run, it's not a good thing for the king of Israel to do, or ever to is work for the enemy. If he worked for the enemy, killing other enemies of the Israelites, it's not such a bad deal. The guy was just killing people. He was killing our enemies. He was doing even some of the work that we needed to have done. Not if he was killing Israelites, not if he was raiding Israelites.
You know, it seems even at this point, David is a man who will do what David needs. You know, whatever will work for him.
Yes, it is possible. But we do know that he would, he at least told the Philistines that that's what he was doing. And the Bible will tell you lots about David. That he does certain things that are not nice, that are not good. But it will never tell you that he killed Israelites like this for the Philistines. Being a mercenary is one thing, but being a mercenary and then killing Jews while you're being a mercenary is something that they will not, the Bible will not say that that happened. That would definitely be going too far. We hope that he didn't do it. We hope that he didn't kill Israelites while he was living there for a year. But that's what the Philistines wanted him to do. That's what they were hoping he would do. It's part of the weird story of King David that people don't talk about. We definitely don't like to dwell on this part of David's life. A year or so that he worked for our enemies. Pretty bad. Pretty bad. So, as I told you, today we got to see another side of David, finally. The side of David that makes him a complex and very, very dramatic, and makes him an interesting person for us to think about. So Rosemary, do you have any last words that you want to offer today? You have to. You, David? So I want to thank you for reminding us and dedicating that dedicating this today for him. And yes, it's Rosemary. Yeah,
We
came
We
later.
did love En-Gedi, and when people would say, oh, where should we go in Israel? We want to go to the Dead Sea. And he'd say, oh, don't bother with that. Just go to En-Gedi.
That's nice. Yeah, it was beautiful that we ended up being able to read about En-Gedi today for him. And again, it is. I hope it's a place that people can go to for a long time to at least have a little bit of water to jump around in there. But there used to be like waterfalls.
Waterfall,
Used to be-
seven pools, is that-
Yeah, there used to be pools there you could bathe in, and maybe one day I'll have some good water and stop draining everything out. Now that Israel takes a lot of water from the Red Sea from desalinization, maybe, but the Jordanians are taking a lot of water out from the Jordan. So who knows? But it is a beautiful place, and it's a nice way to remember David Watson, blessed memory. So we'll go out and do good things in his memory too, and we will hopefully see you in person tomorrow night at 7 o'clock for Purim.
I just want to say one thing.
Please.
When we went on our trip to Israel.
Yes.
With David and Rosemary, he took me under his wing. And he showed that we had free time. He took me, we went into Israel. We saw the church, the Holy Sepulchre. We went into all these different places and stuff. And he showed me everything with such joy in his heart to share. And I will never forget that. It's like a full day of David just showing me things I probably wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Beautiful.
And it was a great day. So thank you, Rosemary. and David.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're gonna now get ready for Purim, and Wendy will be here tomorrow night, and Rick and Addie will be here tomorrow night.
And I'm
It's
a
the first.
narrator.
It's the first time that we've had all three of them together helping us celebrate holidays. So hopefully a lot of people, and we will have home and Tashin. We actually have some home and Tashin here that we're going to go out with today. So it will be filled with home and Tashin over the next 24 hours. So thanks everybody for being with us, and see you hopefully in person soon. Take care, everybody. Happy Purim. Happy Purim. Happy Purim. Abigail.
Tracy stepping.